Your fire is dying, and you can't leave to get more wood. That's it. That's the whole crisis. Not a lion at the entrance, not a flood at your feet, just a fire running low, rain outside that hasn't let up in a day and a half, and no way to fix it without walking into weather that will drop your body temperature fast enough to kill you before nightfall. This is a normal Tuesday, 60,000 years ago. We don't think about weather as a threat anymore. To us, rain is the thing that happens outside a window while we're already warm. Ancient humans didn't get that luxury. For most of the time our species has existed, a 2-day rainstorm was one of the most dangerous events a person could live through. And figuring out how to survive it may have quietly built half of human culture. Here's the case for that. Rain was a 3-way death sentence. Start with the obvious one. Cold. Wet skin loses heat roughly 25 times faster than dry skin. No jacket, no waterproof shelter, temperatures anywhere below about 50 Fahrenheit. And hypothermia isn't a risk after a few hours. It's a near certainty. That threshold got crossed constantly. Even in Africa, high elevation regions during wet season get cold enough at night to be lethal to a soaked, exposed body, then flooding. The cave and rock shelter sites humans depended on were almost always near water or at the base of a slope. That's exactly why they existed as shelters in the first place, which means heavy rain sent water straight at them. Archaeologists digging into occupied cave floors keep finding sediment layers deposited while people were still living there, and in some cases, that's the last layer. The site was abandoned, permanently, and then predators. Rain pushes every animal in the area toward the same dry, defensible ground humans were already using. At several cave sites in South Africa, human bones and large cat bones turn up mixed together in the same layer, and some of those human skulls have puncture wounds that match a leopard's canine spacing almost exactly. So rain didn't create discomfort. It created a pressure cooker. Predator, prey, and human, all forced into the same square meters of dry ground at the same time. And the one resource standing between a group and all three threats at once was fire. Losing the fire wasn't a hassle. It was the emergency. Here's the detail that reframes everything. For most of human history, people were much better at keeping a fire burning than starting one from nothing. Controlled fire use goes back at least 400,000 years, possibly close to 1,000,000, based on finds at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. But reliably striking a new fire from scratch is a separate skill, and for tens of thousands of years, a lot of people simply couldn't do it on demand, which is why groups carried fire instead of relighting it. Smoldering embers, wrapped and packed inside a fungus that could hold a spark for hours, essentially a biological lighter carried from camp to camp. When Otzi the Iceman was found frozen in the Alps 5,300 years after he died, his belt pouch still held a full fire-starting kit. Tinder fungus, flint, pyrite for sparking, backup tinder. Even that late, losing your fire was serious enough that people carried redundant equipment against it. So when the rain came, the first move wasn't building a shelter, it was protecting the fire that already existed. Pull it deeper into the cave, shield it with hide, feed it dry wood pulled from the undersides of dead conifer branches, still protected by the canopy above. Split wet logs open for the dry core inside. Use birch bark as kindling, because a compound in the bark called betulin will actually burn wet. For hours, one person's entire job might have been sitting next to that fire, doing nothing but keeping it alive, because it wasn't optional. It was warmth, light, cooked food, and predator defense, all in one flame. With the fire secured, boredom wasn't an option. Production was once the fire held and the group was mostly dry. They still couldn't go outside, so they built things. This is where the archaeological record gets loud. Cave floors are covered in half-finished stone tools, and the tiny debris flakes that fly off while you're shaping one concentrated exactly where the firelight would have reached. But it goes further than stone tools. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered a 100,000-year-old workstation for grinding pigment. Abalone shells used as mixing containers. Ochre ground down to powder, bone tools for stirring it in. That's not survival behavior. That's a process, repeated with intention. Bone needles start showing up around 61,000 years ago in South Africa, later across Europe and Asia. Thin, precisely drilled, requiring stillness and fine motor control you don't have while fleeing anything. You make a needle like that when you have hours and nowhere to be. Then there's rope. At Abri du Maras in France, researchers found a fragment of twisted plant fiber, the oldest confirmed string ever recovered. At Hohlefels in Germany, a 35,000-year-old ivory tool turned up with 4 drilled holes and spiral grooves, built specifically to twist fiber into cord. Someone carved a dedicated rope-making tool. Cordage is slow, repetitive, and mind-numbing to produce, which makes it possibly the single best bad weather task imaginable, and it unlocked almost everything after it. Bound tools, snares, better shelters, even comfort got engineered. At Sibudu Cave, 77,000-year-old bedding turned up, layered rushes and sedges topped with leaves from a plant that naturally repels insects, and periodically burned and replaced to stay clean. That's not just a place to sleep, that's pest control. 77,000 years before anyone had a word for it. Then it stops being about survival at all. Here's the part that shouldn't make sense, but does once you think about what these people actually had: time, firelight, and nowhere to go. The paintings at Chauvet Cave in France are around 36,000 years old. Lions, rhinos, horses, bears rendered with an understanding of anatomy and motion that still stops people in their tracks. These weren't sketched quickly. Someone spent thousands of hours watching these animals move and then reconstructed them from memory, underground, by the light of animal fat lamps. And Chauvet isn't unique. Lascaux, Altamira, and the cave art of Sulawesi in Indonesia, dated to at least 45,000 years ago, the oldest figurative art known anywhere. What's telling is where these paintings are. Not at the cave mouth, where you'd actually shelter, deep inside, past narrow crawl spaces, hundreds of meters into total darkness. Nobody makes that trip when the weather's good and the hunting's easy. You make that trip when you've already sharpened every tool you own, the rain has been going for 2 days straight, and there's genuinely nothing left to do. We can't prove art was born on rainy days, but the timing lines up too well to ignore. The biggest creative explosion in human prehistory happened in exactly the places where people were most likely to be trapped for days at a time. And that same trap time built culture itself. Put 15 to 30 people in a confined space for 2 days with nothing urgent to do, and something predictable happens. They talk. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner tracked this directly, comparing daytime and nighttime conversations among the Juhanzi and the Kalahari. Daytime talk was practical: land, food, disputes. At night, around the fire, over 80% of conversation shifted to stories, songs, and shared history. Firelight itself seemed to change what people were willing to say. And that fireside talk wasn't idle. It was where survival knowledge got passed on: which waterholes hold out through the dry season, which plants are safe, where the good flint is. Real information, moving from one mine to another with no other way to travel, some of it stuck for an extraordinarily long time. The oldest oral traditions ever verified against real geological events are Aboriginal Australian stories describing coastline changes from roughly 7,000 years ago. Accurate accounts, kept alive for 7 millennia through nothing but repetition. That kind of retention doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a group spends an enormous amount of forced, unstructured time doing exactly one thing: telling each other the same stories, over and over, until they don't go away. But rain wasn't only a threat. Here's the twist the video doesn't usually get credit for going deep enough into. Rain also handed ancient humans real advantages. Right after a storm, the ground goes soft, and soft ground holds the clearest tracks you'll ever find. Species, speed, direction, timing, all readable at a glance. Rain also meant water. Carved rock basins near prehistoric campsites show signs of being deliberately deepened to catch and hold rainwater, meaning people were engineering their own reservoirs. And rain-triggered food. Mushrooms and certain plants surge right after a storm. Wet soil makes tubers easier to dig. Insects surface. In tropical Africa, termites swarm after rain, dense in protein, requiring no tools or weapons to harvest, just hands. Chimpanzees do this today after storms, and it's a near certainty early humans did the same, likely at much larger scale. The takeaway: so, what did ancient humans do when it rained? Everything that mattered. They protected the one flame keeping them alive. They shaped tools for the next hunt, twisted the rope holding their shelters together, ground the pigment that would end up on a cave wall 100 meters underground. They told the stories that carried knowledge forward by mouth alone because writing didn't exist yet. And when the rain finally broke, they stepped out onto perfect tracking ground with a season's worth of tools already made. Rain didn't cost them time. It's arguably where they built almost everything that wasn't hunting, because when your next meal depends on what your hands can produce in the next few hours, there's no room left for boredom. There's only the fire, the work in front of you, and the fact that you're still here to do it.